Good morning. Welcome back to KXAN Live. I'm your anchor, Esmeralda Zamora, and today we are back with another Kristen's Classroom with meteorologist Kristen Currie. Kristen, good morning. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Not too bad. Halfway through the week, a very quiet weather week.
Yes, very dry.
So it's been nice.
I'm glad to see the sun is finally back and we're not super chilly or super rainy, but excited to talk about what we're going to talk about, which has to do with all of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to see these quiet stretches of weather because it gives us some time to maybe talk about fun things that we wouldn't otherwise get the time to talk about if there's severe weather or if there's tropical systems or some sort of active weather pattern. So today I figured we'll talk about weather satellites because there's been some new and exciting information this week about it.
Well, let's jump into it. What is it? What is its name? And what does it do?
Yeah, so this is the GOES-R satellite series. So GOES standing for geostationary satellite. So there's technically 4 of them, but 2 that we use, and they sit right above the equator, over 22,000 miles above the surface. Now, these 2 satellites give us a really good picture of the eastern side of the United States and Atlantic, and the other, the western side of the United States and the Pacific. But the GOES-16 was the first in a series of 4. This was launched back in 2016. It's now referred to as GOES-R, and that's the GOES East, the one that's really highlighting the eastern side of the nation and central U.S. too, but the Atlantic, and it gives us a full disk view, and it's very crucial in, as you can imagine, hurricane forecasting, right? Since a lot of the hurricanes, especially here in Texas, come out of the Atlantic or kind of creep up from the Caribbean and the Gulf. GOES-17 launched 2 years later in 2018. It's now referred to as GOES-S, and it is currently the backup to GOES-18, which was launched 4 years later, now GOES-T or GOES-West. So that's the other side of the United States. This week, GOES-19, which was actually launched last year, so 2024, GOES-19 became fully operational and is replacing GOES-16 as GOES East this week, this past Monday. So now GOES-19 is GOES East and GOES-18 is GOES West, with GOES-16 and 17 as the backups out there. And it's really nice because, that way if something happens, we can still get some data from those backups. We can put those online. And by we, I'm talking about NASA, who's, the group, the organization, the agency that sends these satellites up into outer space. But NOAA is the one who actually runs these satellites and collects that data. So it's pretty interesting. It's just, one set of satellites. We've got a couple other weather satellites up there, but the newest information was the fact that this week GOES-19 became operational and is now GOES East, which, as you can see, it displaces that 2016 satellite.
And Kristen, you keep saying GOES-19, GOES-17. What does GOES stand for?
It was the I knew you were going to ask me, geostationary orbiting satellites. So geostationary orbiting satellites, meaning they're staying put. They actually rotate at the same speeds as the Earth does, at the same speed. So it's always looking at the same part of our planet, which is really important. And we can actually get images every 5 to 10 minutes out of these satellites. And they measure all sorts of different things for us.
And how exactly do you use them daily to create your forecast for everyone?
Yeah, let's get into it. So when it comes to some of the different applications of this data, there's all sorts. We use this data into atmospheric sciences, hydrology, climate sciences, oceanography. The list goes on. And basically the goal is using this data to protect public and property. The biggest one that comes to mind is hurricane forecasting, right? With weather balloons and weather stations on land, we get really good weather data, an abundant, our quality and quantity of data over land tend to be pretty fantastic for most areas, especially here in the United States, which is so populated. Once you get into the middle of the ocean, you're not able to put those weather stations all over or have those weather balloons go up. The exception being, sometimes the Navy on some of their ships, they can actually do some weather balloons. But the satellites give us really good imagery of what's happening over the oceans, which obviously plays into hurricane forecasting, right? More improved hurricane tracking, more improved hurricane forecasting. We get better monitoring of smoke, of dust, of lightning within some severe storms. There's also, some improved warning of communication disruptions. By that, I mean that there's some technology on those satellites that actually measure radiation. So any sort of major disruption in radiation that satellite can pick up can give us better lead time on maybe, a geomagnetic storm that could potentially cause some problems down here on the surface.
And what specific technologies are different to this specific GOES-R satellite than the one we had previously?
Well, this is kind of a new set. So, the GOES-16, which is the one being replaced by the new one this week, is just going to have not only some newer technology, but this is one of the first series of satellites that had that lightning mapping capability of it, which is huge. I mean, you think about the fact that if you've ever seen any of those time lapses of a storm looking, bird's eye view of all the lightning within the storm, that came from satellite, that came from GOES. And it can do a whole bunch of things. Just to kind of read off some of those other highlights here. We mentioned the hurricane improvements as far as forecasts and intensity forecasts and tracking forecasts. Where are those hurricanes going to go? But also increased thunderstorm and tornado lead times. If we see a big pulse of lightning within a thunderstorm, we know that thunderstorm is intensifying, right? So that could give forecasters down here on the ground heads up as to, hey, watch that thunderstorm, because if all of a sudden the satellite's picking up on all sorts of different activity with lightning inside that cumulonimbus cloud, you could get maybe an earlier severe thunderstorm warning or an earlier tornado warning with that. Air quality warnings is another thing. Air quality alerts that this can give us a better lead time on. Transportation safety, aviation safety is also attributed to the improvements that these satellites have made. And then we talked about, some of those radiational hazards with the geomagnetic storms. And we could really get into like the nitty gritty of all these different scientific tools on these satellites, but it's just really nice to have those up there and have that collaboration with NOAA and NASA, because, those images, and I can actually show you this image.
Well, those are the images you take.
This is from yesterday. So this is GOES East, like I said, the one that's right over the equator that kind of focuses on eastern U.S. And the Atlantic, but it will give you a full disk picture. You could really narrow this in and look just at the Gulf, just at the Atlantic, but I wanted to kind of show the capability of GOES East here because I thought that was quite impressive. And then the flip side would be GOES West. So you can see this is the Pacific Basin, the western portion of the United States, but really North America as a whole. So it's impressive, and this is available to the public too. You can just go online. You could get a new image of Earth every 5 to 10 minutes.
Wow. Well, we'll be right back after this break to talk a little bit more about GOES satellites. And we're back, Kristen. Before we move on, I wanted to ask you again, exactly in your day-to-day here at KXAN, when is it that you use a GOES satellite image or anything?
A lot of the times I personally will use it to monitor cloud cover, and I can show you using one of our maps that you see all the time here in KXAN. The radars, the regional radars, are what highlight and show us precipitation. So that's the greens with the rain, the pinks with the wintry mix, and the white. Some of the white would be snow. It's more of a purpley white, which you can see up there in northern Michigan. But those brighter whites, you see that big old band off the coast of the eastern seaboard, in addition to the Pacific Northwest. Those are clouds, and that we can only see from satellites. Satellites are what give us the imagery of the clouds, and then the radars give us the imagery of the precipitation. So day to day, I'm looking at the satellites to see where are my clouds, and the darker the colors tend to indicate with the clouds lower to the ground. Those brighter whites you see indicate high cloud covers. So that would be an application I would use in your forecast. If I'm looking at a lot of cloud cover up top, I'm going to see a lot of bright white over Texas. If I'm looking at maybe some fog or low clouds, it would be indicated by some of those darker gray colors. What's unfortunate or fortunate, depending on how you look at it, is we don't have any clouds out there today. Nothing in central Texas, nothing in Texas as a whole, nothing really across the southern plains. We are completely cloud and precipitation free. So that I can only be able to say with the confirmation of satellites showing there is nothing around us, nothing on top from that GOES satellite looking down, you're going to see straight to the surface. There's not going to be any sort of visibility implications there.
That looks way different from what we were looking at just a couple days ago.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mean, while we're here, we might as well talk about it. That 7-day forecast, it's going to be a while before those GOES satellites pick up on some cloud cover. I mean, it is almost bizarre, suspicious, eerie, if you will.
Quiet.
Yeah, the fact that we have been quiet for the past few days and continue to stay quiet for the next 6 to 7 days. I mean, we're talking sunshine, 80s and 90s here, and we're going to take that all the way into the early part of next week. But, the GOES satellites too, I will say, is just one tool in the toolbox for us. When it comes to these forecasts that we make, that data that will get pulled in by the satellites, most of it gets dumped into our computer models that help us figure out what is the high temperature going to be for today, what is the cloud cover going to be for today, and the low temperature and things like that. So it might not necessarily be a direct observation from the satellite going into the forecast, but all that data that is stored and accumulated and observed from the satellites gets put into these computer models. All that data comes in, does all those weather equations, and then the output is what I look at to make my own forecast that I show you on TV every day.
Wow. Well, some of the events that we've had here in Central Texas include severe wildfires. Mm-hmm. Does the GOES satellite help in any way to track this?
Yes. In fact, satellites sometimes can be our only indication that a wildfire has started, especially in more remote areas, because satellites will pick up on the smoke. Mm-hmm. And so, when we see, especially in some of those more rural areas of Northern California, the satellites will pick up on the smoke, and then they're going to forecasters can then dispatch out, say, hey, we're seeing this. Do you guys see any smoke? There's also a feature on the satellites that can do heat detection, like thermal imagery. So if all of a sudden a fire sparks and you see this big old spot that shows much hotter temperatures down here at the surface than the surrounding, we would say, hey, maybe there's a wildfire there. But you can also sometimes use the satellites to indicate, is there any smoke or thermal imagery? And then the radar will sometimes pick up on the smoke because what it's thinking is tiny little raindrops or precipitation is actually smoke particles. And so on some of those big wildfires, you can actually see that smoke trail indicated by radars and not just weather satellites. So long story short, yes, that those weather satellites can help detect wildfires, no doubt about it, and even some hot spots in some of those larger wildfires. It's interesting. We've just been doing some stories recently about how now they're using artificial intelligence to actually pick up on some of that. Because, if the satellite's looking at some of the smoke particles and seeing this trail, there's got to be a human there to see it, to interpret it. But with AI, that actually will give you an even bigger heads up and even more advance on a small fire before it turns into a bigger fire with the help of some artificial intelligence, which I think is a very good and useful tool. There's a lot of hesitation, I think, from a lot of people saying, I don't know, I've seen how this ends. But I think that's a fantastic way to utilize some of this technology, whereas it's not replacing a human, it's helping human. And, if worst case scenario, it's actually helping, I would say best case scenario, it's helping keep people safe and their property safe.
Mm-hmm. And these satellites, when you say that they do catch wildfires or smoke or, like you said, smoke particles, how big does that fire need to be able to be seen from these satellites?
It all kind of depends. I mean, sometimes, if you have a cloudy sky over that wildfire, you're relying simply on the thermal imagery to be able to see that fire. We're typically not talking about, little burns or bonfires in your backyard. Like, they would need to be
big fires.
Yeah, I would say, we could easily see those Los Angeles wildfires on satellite. It's just more the smoke plume that you're going to be looking for from satellite or that thermal imaging. So at least several acres at the very minimum, but the bigger, the more obvious it will be. And it doesn't even have to be, wildfires in the sense of it burning timber and vegetation. Sometimes it can be buildings. Sadly, the Twin Towers on September 11th, you could see the smoke plume from satellites because it was so big there in New York City, and they can really narrow it down. They can really zoom in on the earth to see what's happening there. So they'll use that in any way and any capability they need to detect some of that smoke, whether it be wildfire, a burning structure, or volcanoes. Volcanoes are another one. I mean, typically volcanic islands are very remote, and so they can use those satellites to monitor the activity of different volcanoes, I should say.
So it's great that we have this new satellite up, and not only just a satellite, but we have backups, which is amazing. How far up are these satellites orbiting right now?
About 22,000 miles, just over 22,000 miles above the equator. So they're sitting above the equator, always looking at the same side of Earth. And there's also some polar orbiting satellites as well, which are different from what I'm talking about today. But the GO series is one of the most sophisticated satellite weather observation networks of the Western Hemisphere. I mean, NOAA has worked really hard from 2016 to now to get those 4 satellites up and running, and especially with some of the lightning capabilities, that's huge for severe weather areas like us here in Central Texas. So it's nice to have some of those 2 newer satellites, like I mentioned, GOES 18 in 2022, and then GOES 19 in 2024. Those are when they first launched, and usually they have about a 10-year lifespan at least. So we've got some good tools up there that we can use to help us down here at the surface.
Well, thanks for sharing all the details and how you use them. It's always interesting to learn more how meteorologists work and how we get our weather coverage every single day. Yesterday, I spoke with Nick about our hurricane season that we're expecting, and this is going to play a big role in that.
For sure, absolutely. And you'll see us, when we we'll sometimes post on social media the satellite imagery of hurricanes. It's just so impressive. And sometimes the bigger storms, when they have got that very pronounced and big eye from satellite, you can see all the way down through that eye, through the stadium effect, down to the surface of the ocean from satellites. I mean, you think about, other than the International Space Station, those are what we rely on to give us those images of hurricanes in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, and we're not going to have the International Space Station much longer, so this is great.
Hopefully, if everything stays on course, we'll have at least these satellites for the next 10 years, at least.
Well, we do have your article that you published this morning here on our website. It's titled "New Weather Satellite Goes Live," and this image is amazing.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And I will tell you too, if you go to you could just throw it in Google the GOES imagery satellites. They have a really cool interactive, I believe it's a NASA website page, where you can actually look and toggle around what it looks like from all different dimensions of that satellite. And again, they're going to look very similar, the GOES East and the GOES West. But I thought that was such a cool and teachable moment for kids, because there's always kind of this fascination with outer space. So to know that when I go to the classroom, I say, we have computers in outer space that help our computers down here at the ground, is how I tell them. But to think we've got 2 computers in outer space that constantly live in the same spot, and they rotate with Earth at the same pace, at the same speed, so that we always get this look at what we look like from the top down, I think is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I bet their brains are going 100 miles an hour when they hear you talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's impressive as a meteorologist to think that we can get the data that fast. I mean, every 5 to 10 minutes, we got Wi-Fi slower than that, So to think that we have the satellite sending back these important images for, life-saving weather events every 5 to 10 minutes. And they could even narrow it down during severe weather season too, to certain spots of the United States. I mean, I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful that there are those smarter than me that were able to get these up and running, that I could use it for my job here in Central Texas.
Yes. Well, thanks for sharing, Kristen. We're excited to see what topic you have for us next week. And we are going to be here on KXAN Live later today as well as tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us.